Today, we are talking about 5 tips for a better podcast audio mix. I'm Joe Wise of JSW Productions, and welcome to our YouTube channel. All right, so today I've got open a session from Space for Life with Tommy Thompson. I'm excited to jump into that. Before I do, there are 3 things I like to keep in mind before I tackle any mix. The first is to keep the volume level consistent throughout the entire episode. Now, I know that sounds simple, but in my opinion is the most important thing that any producer or engineer can do. Number 2, which goes hand in hand with that, is we want to reduce or eliminate distractions as much as possible. Part of the nature of podcast audio is it's not as much done in a studio with an engineer, sound treatment, and you get this perfect isolated vocal. More often than not, you've got someone who's doing a Zoom conversation, someone's calling in, someone's cutting the grass next door, a dog barking in the background. The list goes on, but the point is there are a lot of distractions, and not all of those are bad, but we want to try to eliminate those as much as possible so that the listener can engage with the content in the best way. And then number 3 is we want to use our ears, but not overdo things. Sometimes less is more. So let's dive into this episode of Space for Life podcast. All right, so let's jump into the 5 tips. The first one is listen for distractions. I like doing this first because I find that a lot of times once I've been sitting in the audio a little bit longer, start getting some ear fatigue, I start hearing things that maybe weren't distractions at first and probably wouldn't be distractions for the average listener. And then I start over processing the audio. And then I find that 9 out of 10 times I scrap that and restart. And so I like, whether I address it or not at first, I like to listen throughout the episode and just kind of listen to see if there are any consistent distractions.
And I can't really think of anyone
I'm just gonna play a little bit at the beginning.
Doesn't benefit a little bit from a conversation on this. So I want to hear from you because you have this way of unpacking really big things.
Okay, so real quick, I'm going to stop and I'm going to address this. I heard that harsh plosive. From the shape of it, it should be right here.
Unpacking really.
Yep. So you can hear that packing there. And so especially in the intro, I want to try to get rid of that as much as possible. There's some plugins that work for this, but I find they don't work quite as well or sound unnatural. And so I'm just going to manually go in and do a little surgery here. And so I'm going to zoom in. Okay, right here's the shape. You can see it kind of looks like I guess, a backward S. And where it goes over the line and where it switches to come under, you can just split it and then draw a fade in coming out and then a fade into it. And then if you play it again,
unpacking really,
you can hear it sounds a little bit more natural and has less of the air blow into the mic. And so that's just how you can get rid of some plosives. So I'm going to keep listening through.
Hear from you.
Noticed a few things there.
Being back together, we record these episodes sometimes in kind of little.
Okay, so there may be some more, but right off the bat, I hear that the S's are really strong.
So
here.
I want to hear from you.
And there's a lot of the mouth noises, the kind of stuff. And so I want to try to eliminate those. I'll use some plugins for that. And then there's a good bit of reverb that I want to address. And so first, in my chain.
This is Patricia Clark, and I'm back with Tommy Thompson, and we're gonna.
So this is RX is DeEsser. Waves also has a great one, but it doesn't matter too much. The DeEsser.
Clark, and I'm back with Tommy Thompson, and we're gonna talk.
So I'm gonna flip it. I'm gonna mute this channel. Listen right now.
Doesn't benefit a lot. Hi, everyone. This is Patricia Clark, and I'm back with Tommy Thompson, and we're going to talk about a great topic today, which is growing clarity and focus. And I can't really think of anyone who doesn't benefit. Everyone, this is Patricia Clark, and I'm back.
Okay, so there's still some S's in there, but it's a little bit more natural sounding and just not hammering that S in. So that's good for now. And I'm going to open up. This is also an RX-8. Would highly recommend RX-8, and we'll get to a little bit of that later. But this is a mouth declick.
Everyone, this is Patricia Clark.
And same thing, I'm going to reverse it and you can hear the noises that are being removed. So it's not picking up anything else.
A little
That's
bit
great.
from a conversation on this. So I want to hear from you because you have this way of unpacking really big things into
All right, so I'm going to do that for this vocal as well. I'm just going to copy it down.
Sometimes in kind of little.
So that brings us to tip number 2, which is using dynamic compression over EQ. So a mistake that I've made for a number of years, and a lot of the old episodes or things that I go back and listen to that I've done drives me crazy to hear because the vocal sounds over processed and doesn't have any life to it because I went crazy on EQ. So rather than addressing problems first with EQ, I'll use a dynamic compressor. And then later, if I need specifically to address something with EQ, I will. But instead of addressing a temporary problem with a permanent solution, I'm just going to use dynamic EQ. So I'm going to open up. Here we go. Let's address this one first.
And I can't really think of anyone who doesn't benefit.
What I noticed
a little
is
bit
right
from
in
a
that 500,
conversation on
600
this.
range.
So I
It's a
want to
little
hear
bit
from
harsh,
you
and
because
so
you
I
have
wanna
this
dip
way of unpacking really big things into concrete, practical.
And so this still has a little bit of
ways that
life
are
to it
portable
without
and
addressing it
usable.
EQ.
So let's talk about what you mean first by clarity and focus, and then we're also going to get to
And
the
I'm gonna
process
do the same
and
thing
specific tools for the process of gaining
on the
clarity
other
and
channel,
focus.
where I noticed.
Sounds great. First of all, it's really fun being back together. We record these episodes sometimes in kind of little.
So I kind of just use the search and destroy method for this, where I'm finding a frequency. Sometimes I'll do a full kind of like sweep like this to find the frequency that was standing out.
It's really fun being
and then
back.
just clean it up that way. So then the third tip, and this is one of my favorites, is using Waves Vocal Writer to automate the vocal levels. So like I mentioned, the number one priority is keeping the vocal consistent at a level volume. And compression and all of that is helpful, but if you over compress it, it's going to sound flat and just unnatural in a way that you don't want a podcast that's supposed to sound like a conversation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this Waves Vocal Writer plugin, and I'm going to use it before I go into compression so that I can kind of automate the vocal and then compress it without it hitting the compressor too hard. All right, so if you open it up, I'm going to choose to automate the Writer fader. I've already has that selected on, and so I'll pull that out for both channels. I'm going to pull the settings to about -18 is my target that I do, preference. And then I pull this down to -12, kind of leave the rest. I'm going to turn it on to right. One thing that I'll note as I'm doing this is I like to change the gain so that the volume's going to hover around unity. And so if I have this here, I start playing
Hi,
this
everyone.
channel.
This is Patricia Clark, and I'm back.
You can see
with
that it's
Tommy
starting
Thompson,
to dip
and we're gonna
more
talk
off the
about
bat.
A great
And so I'm just going to go ahead and pull that down -1.8 dB. And then I split it, so I'm going to pull it over here as well. And then now if I play it,
with Tommy Thompson, and we're going to talk about a great topic today.
Might have pulled it
which
down a
is
little bit too
growing-
much, but it's still hovering around 0, which is great. And I'm going to do the same thing for the other channel. I'll pop down here.
First of all, it's really fun being back together. We were
It's pushing a little bit, and so I'm just going to pull that up 0.9 dB. Okay, so then I'm going to make sure both of these are selected to right, and then set this latch, and then before I do any kind of editing or anything, I'm just going to set this up and then start playing. And so as I'm listening through, it's automating the
Hi,
volume.
everyone. This is Patricia Clark.
You can see
and
it's
I'm back
writing
with
it
Tommy
in
Thompson,
on that red line
and
right
we're going
there.
to talk about a great topic today.
So that's the third tip. And the fourth tip is compress and then limit on each channel. And so as we just did, we'll automate the vocal level and then go into the compressor afterwards so it's not hitting it too hard. One of my favorite compressors right now is the CLA2A. And so I'm just going to pull that up.
Patricia Clark, and I'm back with Tommy Thompson.
hitting it a little
and
bit
We're going
hard,
to
so I'm
talk
gonna pull it
about a
down.
great topic today, which is growing clarity and focus. And I can't really think of anyone who doesn't benefit a little bit from a conversation on this. So I want to hear from you because you have this
All right, that
way
looks pretty
of
solid. And
unpacking
so
really
I'm just
big
going to go
things
ahead
into concrete, practical
and
ways that are portable
done
and
this
usable.
before.
So let's
And
talk
then
about what you mean first by clarity.
copy it over. So I've got a similar compressor because in theory, the vocal level is going to be similar coming in
Sounds
with the
great. First of all,
vocal writer.
it's really fun being back together.
However, it's
We
not
record
quite
these.
there, so I'm going to pull the gain down a little bit. And then, like I said, I'm going to put a limiter on each channel. And so what that's going to do is, if everything else is set up right, it's just going to cut out the peaks. And so you're not compressing with the limiter where it's just going to be a harsh cutoff, but you're just trimming those top spikes of a laugh, of a shout, or whatever it ends up being. So that is tip number 4. Now, before we get into tip number 5, I mentioned that there is a reverb problem at first. And so what I like to do for that is I'll export the audio. I'm just going to do this section though for right now. So I'll export it as a wave, space for life, and call it RX test. So I'll open up the RX Advanced Audio Editor, drag in the file, and I'll open up the Repair Assistant, pop up with a dialog box, start analysis. It'll run it, which is great. And then, so it runs it, it shows that there are no clicks or clipping or hum, which is great because I've already reduced the clicks, but it shows that noise was detected, which is the reverb that I was hearing. So it pops up with a couple different options. You can click on it, increase it or decrease it. Generally, I'll go with the dialog isolate one, and then I'll go ahead and render that. Then once you render it, you see here it says History Repair Assistant. You're good to go. Exit out. Then you export here. Command E on a Mac. Export settings should be what it came in. And then I'll just rename it Post RX or something like that. Export it. Then back in Pro Tools, you can drop in the new file. It's good to go. Now, the 5th tip is mastering with a loudness meter. So I'm going to open up the master channel. And the first thing I'm going to do is at the end of the chain, I'm going to put in, I love the Waves WLM Plus, the loudness meter plus. And then with it, you can open up a setting that's already set for Apple Podcast and music. So if I open it up,
Hear from you because you have this way.
You can see where it's coming up.
Really big.
I'm going to reset this so it's not showing old data.
Doesn't benefit a little bit from a conversation on this.
All right, so I can see that I'm a little bit below where I'm trying to hit. And so the first thing I'm going to do, I also like the Maserati GRP plugin. If you have iZotope elements, that's great for mastering, but something like that. So I'm going to open up the GRP, started on the master one. Now, if you see right off the bat, I can tell that it's going to be compressing a little bit too high on the high end for me. So I'm going to just pull that back, something like this, which from music to podcast should be a little bit more natural.
Hi, everyone. This is Patricia Clark, and I'm back with
a little bit
Tommy
still
Thompson,
high on the S.
and we're going to talk about a great topic today.
That's pretty
which
solid
is
for me. Now let's
growing
open up the
clarity
plugin.
and focus. And I can't really think of anyone who
Good, but it's hitting a little bit
benefit
hard, so
little
I'm going
bit
to hit
from
some more
a conversation
limiters.
on this. So
I'm going to pull this
I want to hear
down
from you because you
just
have this
a little bit.
way of unpacking really big things into concrete, practical ways that are portable and usable. So let's talk about what you mean first by clarity and focus, and then we're also going to get to the process. Some specific
And I'm trying to
tools for
dial it in,
processing.
and that looks solid. And then I'm going to bounce the episode.